Welcome to Spicy Family Scandals, where real-life drama meets hard-earned wisdom. Today's story is about betrayal, resilience, and the power of standing up for yourself. Let's dive in.
You always had a way of ruining things, Karen. Her words hit like a cold slap across the face. But it wasn't her tone or even the insult that made my stomach twist. It was the fact that she was holding my journal, my private leather-bound journal, the one I kept hidden in the bottom drawer of my nightstand. How did you get that? My voice cracked as I stepped toward her. My mother-in-law, Evelyn, sat perched on my couch like a smug queen on her throne. Her wrinkled fingers flipped through the pages with deliberate slowness, her lips curling upward as she scanned the entries. "You shouldn't leave things lying around if you don't want people finding out who you really are," she said, her eyes never leaving the pages. I felt a surge of panic. That journal held everything. My raw thoughts, my struggles, the doubts I'd never dared to voice out loud, including the entries about Mark. I didn't leave it lying around, I snapped, my pulse racing. "You went into my room, into my private things." She finally looked up, her gaze sharp and unyielding. "You've made yourself quite comfortable in this family, haven't you? Thought you could just waltz in, throw some money around, and everyone would bow down to you." I froze. She was baiting me, her tone dripping with calculated malice. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment outburst. Evelyn had planned this. "Give it back," I said, my voice low and steady. She smirked. "Oh, I will. After I've had a little chat with Mark. He deserves to know what kind of person he's married to, don't you think?" My heart sank. Evelyn had always been difficult, but this was a new low. She was threatening to turn my own words, my vulnerabilities, against me. And the worst part? I had no idea how much damage she could do if she followed through. I tried to keep my composure. "You don't want to do this," I said, taking another step toward her. "Whatever you're trying to prove, this isn't the way." "Oh, but it is," she said, snapping the journal shut and tucking it under her arm. "You've had everyone fooled for years, but not me. I see you for what you really are, a selfish, manipulative little gold digger." The words stung. But what hit harder was the realization that she wasn't just trying to hurt me. She was trying to destroy me. And for the first time in 6 years, I wasn't sure I could stop her. The house was eerily quiet after Evelyn left, but my thoughts were deafening. I stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the door she had slammed behind her, my mind racing with possibilities. How long had she been snooping? What exactly had she read? And most importantly, what was she planning to do with it? Mark came home 2 hours later, oblivious to the storm brewing in his own house. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at my untouched cup of tea. "Hey, babe," he said, leaning in to kiss me on the cheek. "You okay? You look tense." I wanted to tell him, to warn him about his mother's latest scheme, to explain the invasion of privacy, the threats, the sheer gall of it all. But the words wouldn't come. Evelyn's parting smirk flashed in my mind. She was confident, too confident. If I told Mark now, she'd twist it against me. She'd make it seem like I was overreacting or worse, lying. "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Just a long day." Mark studied me for a moment, but thankfully he didn't press. He grabbed a beer from the fridge and settled on the couch, flipping on the game. I excused myself, retreating to the bedroom to think. The next morning the fallout began. I woke to find Mark sitting on the edge of the bed, his phone in his hand, his expression unreadable. "Karen," he said, his voice low. "We need to talk." I sat up, my stomach sinking. "What's wrong?" He held up his phone. My journal, my private journal, was on the screen. She had taken pictures of the pages. Not all of them, but enough. Enough to create chaos. "What is this?" Mark demanded, scrolling through the images. "You wrote about leaving me? About feeling trapped in this marriage? About regretting?" He stopped, his jaw tightening. "About regretting marrying me?" The blood drained from my face. "I didn't mean it like that," I said quickly. "Those were just thoughts. Private thoughts. Thoughts you never shared with me," he interrupted, his tone sharp. "But you shared them with the notebook?" I reached for his hand, but he pulled away, standing up. "Mark, please, you have to believe me. Your mother." "My mother," he snapped. "She told me you'd try to blame her. She said you'd twist it around and make her the villain." I felt like the floor was crumbling beneath me. Evelyn had been planting seeds for months, maybe years, slowly turning Mark against me. And now, with the journal, she had all the ammunition she needed to finish the job. "Mark, think about this. Why would she have pictures of my journal in the first place? Why was she even in our bedroom?" "She said she found it while helping you with the laundry," he said, his voice tinged with doubt. but not enough to stop him from pacing. She didn't want to show me at first, but she said she couldn't sit by and watch you hurt me anymore. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but instead, I took a deep breath, trying to steady the whirlwind of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Evelyn had played her cards perfectly. She'd positioned herself as the concerned mother, the protector, while I was left scrambling to defend myself against her carefully orchestrated lies. I love you, I said, my voice trembling. Everything I've done, everything I've done for us, for this family. Please, Mark, you know me better than this. He looked at me, his eyes filled with confusion and pain. I thought I did, he said quietly before leaving the room. I sat there, stunned, as the weight of Evelyn's betrayal settled over me. She wasn't just trying to hurt me anymore. She was trying to dismantle my entire life piece by piece. And she was winning. But I wasn't going to let her. Not without a fight. What Evelyn didn't know, what no one knew, was that she wasn't the only one who had secrets. And if she wanted to play dirty, I could play dirtier. Mark didn't come home that night. I didn't expect him to. Evelyn's claws were in him now, and I knew exactly where he was. At her house, listening to her poison drip into his ears. She had him right where she wanted him, and she'd done it with surgical precision. But if she thought I was going to lie down and let her rip my life apart, she didn't know me as well as she thought. The next morning, I woke up with a plan forming in my mind. Evelyn wanted a war? Fine. But I wasn't going to fight it on her terms. I needed to understand her game, her moves, her weaknesses. And I knew just where to start. The first call I made was to Marcy, Evelyn's former neighbor. Marcy had always hinted at Evelyn's little dramas over the years, but I'd never paid much attention. Now I needed details. Karen. Marcy's cheerful voice answered after a few rings. Long time no hear. How's the Queen of Chaos? I couldn't help but let out a dry laugh. Still stirring the pot, apparently. Marcy, I need to ask you something about Evelyn. It's important. Oh, honey, you've come to the right place, she said, her voice dropping conspiratorially. What's going on? I explained, carefully omitting the journal and Mark's doubts for now. Instead, I focused on Evelyn's patterns, her manipulation, her ability to twist the narrative, and how she always managed to come out looking like the victim. Well, that sounds like Evelyn, all right, Marcy said with a sigh. But if you're looking for dirt, you need to talk to Cynthia. Cynthia? I asked, frowning. Her former best friend, Marcy said. They had a huge falling out a few years ago. Something about money or lies. Honestly, I didn't get the full story, but Cynthia sure did. She's got receipts, Karen. I'd bet my casserole dish on it. By noon, I was sitting in a coffee shop across from Cynthia, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with piercing blue eyes and an air of someone who'd seen it all. She didn't mince words. Evelyn is a viper, Cynthia said, stirring her tea. I put up with her antics for years, but the last straw was when she tried to steal my late husband's estate out from under me. Claimed he promised her part of it in some drunken conversation. It was a lie, of course, but she nearly had me in court before I called her bluff. I blinked, stunned. She actually tried to take your inheritance? Cynthia Novet. And she's capable of worse. If she's after you, you need to be smart. She's a master manipulator, but she always leaves a trail. You just have to know where to look. What kind of trail? I asked, leaning forward. Financial, Cynthia said, her lips curving into a grim smile. She's reckless with money, always has been. If she's meddling in your life, chances are it's because she's after something. Your money, your house, your security. Check her records. Follow the money, and you'll find her weak spot. That was all I needed to hear. When I got home, I dove into my files. Mark and I had taken over managing Evelyn's bills when her health declined, and I still had access to her accounts. It didn't take long to find it. A series of large, unexplained transfers from her account to a name I didn't recognize. Alan Sweeney. Who the hell was Alan Sweeney? My pulse quickened as I dug deeper. The transaction started small a year ago, but had increased dramatically in the last few months. Thousands of dollars. Evelyn didn't have that kind of money. I had that kind of money. I'd been covering her medical expenses, trusting her story about being broke. I sat back, my mind racing. Evelyn wasn't just trying to ruin my life. She was stealing from me. And now I had proof. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. She thought she'd cornered me, but she'd made a mistake. She'd underestimated just how far I was willing to go to protect what was mine. It was time to confront her. But not before I had everything I needed to bring her house of cards crashing down. Evelyn answered the door with a practiced smile that dropped the moment she saw me. She was expecting Mark, no doubt. Not the woman she'd been plotting against. I wasn't sure what she was more annoyed by. My presence or the fact that I wasn't falling apart like she wanted. Karen, she said, her voice dripping with false concern. This is a surprise. Is everything all right? I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, holding her gaze. Oh, everything's just fine, Evelyn. I thought it was time we had a little chat. Just the two of us. She closed the door slowly, her smile tightening. I don't know what you think you're doing, barging into my home like this. But if you're here to sling accusations. I don't think, Evelyn. I interrupted, my voice steady. I know. Her eyes flickered just for a moment, but it was enough. She was nervous. Good. I don't have time for your dramatics, she said, turning toward the living room. If you're upset about Mark, you should be talking to him, not me. I followed her, my steps deliberate. You've been busy, haven't you? Digging through my things, twisting my words, turning my husband against me. But that wasn't enough, was it? No, you had to go a step further, stealing from me on top of it. She stopped in her tracks and turned, her expression icy. I don't know what you're talking about. Alan Sweeney, I said, watching her reaction. It was subtle, but her pupils dilated, and her lips pressed into a thin line. Ring any bells? I have no idea who that is, she said quickly, too quickly. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. Then I'm sure you won't mind explaining why thousands of dollars have been transferred from your account to his. Or why that money came from the funds I've been providing for your medical expenses. Her face flushed, and for the first time, she looked genuinely caught off guard. You're mistaken, she said, her voice faltering. I've done no such thing. Oh, but you have, I said, pulling out the printed bank statements I'd brought with me. I laid them on the coffee table, the damning evidence clear as day. You've been funneling money to Alan for months. So who is he? A boyfriend? A partner in crime? Or just another pawn in your little schemes? Evelyn stared at the papers, her jaw tightening. This is none of your business. It became my business the moment you stole from me, I said, my voice rising. And you know what the funniest part is? You could have gotten away with it if you just left me alone. But you had to push, had to dig into my private life, had to try and ruin my marriage. And now here we are. She folded her arms, regaining some of her composure. What do you want, Karen? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. But let me make one thing clear. You don't scare me. I let out a bitter laugh. Oh, Evelyn, you should be scared. Because I haven't even told Mark yet. But when I do, I'll make sure he sees every single transaction, every lie, every ounce of manipulation you've been feeding him. And when he's done with you, there won't be a shred of trust left between you two. For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. Mark will never believe you, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Won't he? I countered. He's upset now, sure. Confused. But he loves me, Evelyn. And once I show him who you really are, he'll see right through you. Her expression hardened. But she didn't say another word. I stepped back, my heart pounding with adrenaline. I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot, but I'd planted the seed. The next move was hers, and I had no doubt she'd try something desperate. Good. The more reckless she became, the easier it would be to take her down. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The storm hit faster than I expected. That night, Mark came home late, his face a mask of exhaustion and frustration. He barely looked at me as he tossed his jacket onto the chair and went straight to the kitchen. I followed, my heart pounding, unsure of what Evelyn had said to him this time. Long day? I asked, keeping my tone casual, though the tension in the air was suffocating. He opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and finally turned to face me. His eyes were weary, but there was something else there too. A flicker of doubt, maybe anger. I talked to Mom today. Of course he did. And, I prompted, bracing myself. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. She said you came over, accusing her of all sorts of things. That you were digging through her finances and threatening her. I let out a bitter laugh, unable to stop myself. Threatening her? That's rich, considering she's been stealing from us. Stealing? His brows furrowed. Karen, she's my mother. She doesn't need to steal anything. If she needed money, she would have just asked. She did ask, I shot back. She's been asking for years, for help with her bills, her medication, her house. And I gave it to her, no questions asked. But it turns out she didn't need all that money for herself. She was sending it to someone named Alan Sweeney. His face darkened, but he didn't respond right away. I stepped closer, my voice softening. Mark, I'm not making this up. I have the bank statements. I can show you. Mom said you'd say that, he muttered, shaking his head. My stomach dropped. She's lying to you, Mark. She's manipulating you. Or maybe you're manipulating me, he snapped, his voice rising. How do I even know those bank statements are real? For all I know, you could have made the whole thing up to get back at her for whatever this is. I stared at him, the weight of his words hitting me like a punch to the gut. You think I'd do that? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer, but the silence was enough. I turned away, my hands trembling. Evelyn had done it. She'd managed to drive a wedge so deep between us that Mark didn't know who to trust anymore. And that was exactly what she wanted. But I wasn't giving up. Not yet. I know this is hard for you to believe, I said after a long pause, keeping my voice calm even though I felt like screaming. She's your mother. You love her. I get that. But you need to ask yourself why she's so desperate to discredit me. What does she have to gain from this? Mark rubbed his temples, clearly torn. I don't know, Karen. I don't know what to believe anymore. Then look at the evidence, I said firmly. Don't take my word for it, and don't take hers. Just look at the facts. If you can't do that, then I don't know how we move forward. His eyes flicked to mine. A mixture of guilt and frustration etched into his features. I need time to think, he said finally, grabbing his jacket. Mark, don't. But he was already out the door. As it clicked shut behind him, I felt a wave of despair crash over me. But underneath it was something stronger. Resolve. Evelyn might have shaken Mark's faith in me, but I still had one advantage, the truth. And if Mark wouldn't confront it on his own, I'd force Evelyn to expose it herself. The next morning, I made a call to a private investigator I'd worked with years ago, when a contractor tried to scam us during a home renovation. He was discreet, thorough, and most importantly, he owed me a favor. I need everything you can find on a man named Alan Sweeney, I told him. And if there's any connection to Evelyn Carter, I want it. By the end of the day, I had my answer, and it was worse than I could have imagined. Alan Sweeney wasn't just some random name. He was a gambler, heavily in debt to several shady lenders. Evelyn hadn't been sending him money out of generosity. She'd been paying off his debts. But why? The answer came in the form of a single line in the investigator's report. Alan Sweeney, DOB March 12, 1981, possible familial relation. I stared at the words, my heart racing. Could it be? Evelyn's biggest secret wasn't just that she'd been stealing from me. It was that she'd been hiding something, or someone, from her own family. And now, I was holding the key to her undoing. The pieces were falling into place. But the picture they formed was something I hadn't expected. Something almost too cruel to believe. Alan Sweeney wasn't just some gambler Evelyn had decided to bail out. He was her son. I sat staring at the investigator's report, my mind spinning. Evelyn had never mentioned another child. Mark had always said he was an only child. And yet, here was undeniable proof. Alan Sweeney, born just a year before Mark, shared Evelyn's maiden name on early records. The trail was clear. Evelyn had a secret life, and I just uncovered it. But why keep Alan hidden? Why funnel thousands of dollars to him, risking everything in the process? The questions swirled, but one thing was clear. Evelyn wasn't going to stop until she buried me, because I was getting too close to the truth. I didn't wait for her to make the next move. The following morning, I drove straight to Evelyn's house, clutching the report in my hand. She was going to explain herself, and this time, there'd be no games, no deflections. She opened the door with her usual air of superiority, but the moment she saw my expression, her confidence faltered. What now, Karen? She asked, feigning exasperation. Haven't you done enough damage? Cut the act, Evelyn, I said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. I turned to face her, holding up the report. You've been lying to everyone. To Mark. To me. To your entire family. Her eyes flickered to the papers in my hand, and for the first time, I saw something resembling panic. I have no idea what you're talking about, she said, her voice unsteady. Alan Sweeney, I said, the name hanging in the air like a bomb about to explode. Your son. Her face drained of color, and for a moment, she looked so small, so defeated, that I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Where did you get that? She demanded, her voice sharp. It doesn't matter, I said, stepping closer. What matters is that I know. I know about him, about the money, about everything. So why don't you save us both some time and tell me the truth? Who is Alan, and why have you been hiding him from Mark? Evelyn sank into the nearest chair, her hands trembling slightly. For a moment she just sat there, staring at the floor. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Alan is my son, she admitted, her words heavy with shame. But he's not Mark's brother. Not really. I frowned, confusion mixing with the adrenaline coursing through me. What do you mean? She looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of defiance and regret. Alan was born before I married Mark's father. I was young, stupid, and I made mistakes. His father was a violent man. I left him and took Alan with me, but I couldn't handle it. When I met Mark's father, he promised me a fresh start, but only if I left Alan behind. The room seemed to spin as her words sunk in. You abandoned him? Evelyn flinched but nodded. I didn't have a choice. I was desperate and I thought he'd be better off without me. And now? I asked, my voice shaking with anger. Now you're trying to make up for it by stealing from me? By destroying my marriage? She stood abruptly, her eyes flashing with anger. You don't understand. Alan is in trouble. He's made mistakes, bad ones. And if I don't help him, he could end up dead. Is that what you want? This isn't about what I want, I snapped. This is about what you've done. You lied to everyone, stole from the people who supported you. And for what? To clean up the mess you made decades ago? You think that justifies ruining Mark's life? Evelyn's defiance crumbled, and she sank back into the chair, tears streaming down her face. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she whispered. I just wanted to protect him. Her vulnerability caught me off guard, but I couldn't afford to let my guard down. Not now. Mark deserves to know the truth, I said firmly. About Alan, about the money, about everything. And if you don't tell him, I will. Evelyn's head shot up, her eyes wide with fear. You can't, she pleaded. He'll never forgive me. That's not my problem, I said, my voice cold. You brought this on yourself, Evelyn. And now, you're going to face the consequences. I turned and walked out, her sobs echoing behind me. My hands were trembling as I got into my car. But I felt a strange sense of clarity. The truth was messy, painful, and unfair. But it was also necessary. Evelyn's house of lies was crumbling, and I was ready to watch it fall. Mark sat silently across from me at the dining table, the stack of evidence between us like a loaded weapon. I had laid it all out. Evelyn's financial records, the investigator's report, and the truth about Alan. He hadn't spoken a word since I finished explaining, and the weight of his silence pressed down on my chest like a stone. She lied to you, Mark, I said softly, breaking the quiet. For years. About who she is, about her past, about what she's been doing to us. And you deserve to know the truth. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. Alan, he said, his voice trailing off. I don't even know how to process this. She's my mom, Karen. She raised me. She's always been difficult, but this. She's been manipulating you, I said gently. And me. And now we're the ones paying the price for her mistakes. Mark looked at the papers again, his expression conflicted. But she's still my mother. What am I supposed to do? Just cut her out of my life. I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. That's your decision to make. But this isn't just about her anymore. It's about us. About whether we can come back from this. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and determination. You think we can? I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat threatening to choke me. That depends on you, Mark. On whether you're willing to see her for who she really is and stop letting her control our lives. I can forgive a lot, but I can't keep fighting this battle alone. He nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to the table. I don't want to lose you, Karen. I really don't. But it's going to take time. A lot of it. I reached across the table, placing my hand over his. We'll get through it. But only if we're on the same side. That night, Mark confronted Evelyn. I stayed behind, knowing this was a conversation they needed to have without me. When he returned, his face was pale, his shoulders heavy with the weight of what had been said. She admitted everything, he said, sinking onto the couch. About Alan. About the money. About how she tried to turn me against you. She said she was trying to protect me, but I think she was just trying to protect herself. And what now? I asked, sitting beside him. He exhaled slowly. I told her I need space. That until she can take responsibility for what she's done, I can't be in her life. It wasn't the clean break I had imagined, but it was enough. For now. In the weeks that followed, Mark and I worked to rebuild the trust that Evelyn had tried so hard to destroy. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the wounds she left felt too raw, too deep. But we leaned on each other, and slowly, the cracks in our foundation began to heal. As for Evelyn, she tried to reach out a few times, but Mark held firm. Without access to his support or my money, she was forced to confront her own mess. Alan, it turned out, was arrested for fraud a month later, and Evelyn's carefully constructed lies came crashing down. Looking back, I realized Evelyn's betrayal wasn't just an attack on me. It was a mirror, forcing me to see the cracks in my own boundaries. I had spent years sacrificing my happiness to please someone who would never be satisfied. I thought that by giving more, by bending further, I could fix what was broken. But some people don't want to be fixed. The lesson wasn't just about Evelyn, it was about me. I learned that boundaries aren't walls, they're lifelines. They protect what matters most: our self-respect, our peace, and the relationships worth saving. To the women reading this who faced their own Evelyns, don't wait for the world to set boundaries for you. Set them yourself. And when someone crosses them, don't be afraid to stand your ground. You're stronger than you think, and you deserve better than to keep proving it.